Our speaker tonight is Peter M. And I just really love Peter's take on the book, on spirituality, on God. And I'm really grateful he's here tonight. So could we all welcome, please, Peter M.
Okay, my name is Peter. I'm a recovered alcoholic. Grateful to be alive and sober and part of a sacred place called Alcoholics Anonymous. And thank Ray for inviting me down here. If anyone doesn't know, Ray started this thing, I don't know how many years ago, on Tuesday nights. And so we're grateful to be here and have a place to call home on Tuesday evening. Some of us call it home. June 23rd, 1988 was my separation from alcohol. And anytime I get to do these, as long as I'm speaking truth, and I hope God allows me to speak truth, is that I always say I'm a recovered alcoholic. And I'm recovered because of this power called God. And I don't say recovered to separate myself from anyone in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, the sacred rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. It is just my truth. Currently, my truth. And I've come to the realization that I can get unrecovered just as quick. But currently, a recovered alcoholic, recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, and on most days, recovered from the things that accompany alcoholism. That just putting down the drink or any other substance doesn't necessarily mean I'm really sober. I'm separated from a substance. I'm separated from alcohol. But as far as a spiritual walk, it looks vastly different. And my goal is to continue to grow in understanding and effectiveness. My job from the get-go is to get right with a power greater than myself. And Alcoholics Anonymous blows the doors open for us. This makes it very inclusive, not exclusive, and talks about a God of our own understanding. But I need to be willing to do that walk. And I need to be free of all the demons or the defects, the cracks in the armor in order for that to happen. And one of the things that we don't want to do that I was really uncomfortable about doing was facing my own demons, because the ego doesn't want to do that. The ego wants to continue to breathe. And as long as I'm willing to do that walk and go in as far as God allows me, it means I'm going to put my foot on the throat of the ego, and the ego is going to fight back. In fact, many of us, as we're starting to wake up spiritually, we would feel a pull back. And it really is the illness trying to keep us in the dark. It's really interesting how this works. Most of us don't want to do, I didn't for a long time, and I kept getting drunk. But most of us don't want to do that walk into darkness, where we go as far as God permits us to go. We can't go any further than He permits us. Into this darkness where we get to look eyeball to eyeball with our own defects, our own sinfulness, our own brokenness. There's something in Scripture that talks about I'm weak flesh sold unto the slavery of sin. I want to do what's right. I know right from wrong. But I continue to do the wrong thing when there's a piece of me that wants to do what's right. And it isn't me who does it, but it's the brokenness or the sinfulness within me that demands I do it. It demands obedience. And many of us don't want to go in and even consider a step 4 because it's too much work. But really what's going on besides the labor that's involved in step 4, it's really going in and taking a look at our own demons. And that darkness looks really dark and bleak, and yet it turns out to be the brightest of lights. But we need to be willing to do that walk. And only desperation will allow me to do that. I've said from a million podiums, many of us are about to do a walk we never walked before. And to take on spiritual principles that we've never done before. And they're telling me to have an experience with a God that I know nothing about. What an order, I can't go through with it. And the only thing that's going to allow me to put one foot in front of the other is the fire that burns in every one of us to be right with the Creator, just to be right with ourselves. Now, I don't know about you, but I look to be right with everything in the bottom of a whiskey bottle. Somewhere in the whiskey bottle, I was going to feel okay. And I did for a long time. In fact, I pour alcohol on my alcoholism. Now we're in sobriety. And we're just dry. We're not on a spiritual walk. I'm making lots of meetings, and I haven't gone in to uncover and discover and discard the things that are blocking me from God. So what do I need to do? I don't have a drink that I'm pouring or any other substance that I'm pouring on this thing in the soul, this cancer in the soul, if you will. So what I need to do now is find some escape valve, some sort of method to combat this. So I go on a sex spree. I go on a food spree. I go on a money spree. I go on a fear spree. I go on a gossip spree. I go on a spree. Because it allows me some ease and comfort temporarily. But I only get drawn back in to my own mess again. So I might get relief, but I never get freedom. And what the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous will not give me is relief. It won't do it. What it will do through the pruning of me, the pruning of the tree, is give me complete liberation from what owned me for so long. And that's alcoholism. And I can't say this enough in an hour, but just putting down a substance, and many of us were forced to put down, we were thrown in a treatment center, we were thrown in a detox or in a jail cell. Some of us walk in and say, need help. But just putting the plug in the jug or putting the stuff away really has little to do with being on a spiritual path. I was locked up many times waiting to see the judge, sitting in the tombs in Lower Manhattan. When I got released on ROR, I was telling some guys about this today, I was not sponsorship material. I was not spiritually fit because I didn't use for 3 days detoxing in a jail cell. In fact, someone like me is more dangerous just abstinent than when I'm drunk. So we need to take a look at, I needed to take a look at, because in my first 6 months I was loony in AA. I was acting out every which way possible. Fear owned me. It drove me. I saw the world through fear. I heard the world through fear. I spoke to the world through fear. My behavior came through fear. And I'm wondering why I can't get right. And when I put my head on the pillow at night, I'm busy during the day doing lots of things to keep me busy. Not all spiritual. But when I put my head on the pillow at night, everything came to a stop, a grinding halt. This voice kept talking. And it wasn't good. And I tossed and turned and tossed and turned and tossed and turned, praying for the daylight so I can get back to doing busy work again and go act out some more. And I'm going to meetings getting 30, 60, 90-day chips. So we need to take a look at what's going on within me. There's something from Scripture, one of my favorite quotes. It says something like, woe to the hypocrites who only clean the outside of the cup and the dish. What's inside is greed and self-indulgence. And what we need to do here is clean out the inside. And the outside will take care of itself. That requires what an order. Can I go through with this one? Because if I'm going to scoop out all the stuff that's in me, the poison that's in me, I have to be met with some desperation in order to do that walk. And I can no longer present God with an ironclad case. Here's my problem, here's my solution, fix it. On my terms. And we're about to go into step 3, which means I'm willing, at this point, truly out of desperation, to live by someone else's rules, perhaps for the first time in my life, whether I'm 20 in here, 18 in here, or I'm 50 coming in for the first time, that everything I've done up until this point has not worked. The ego doesn't even want to entertain a statement like that. But I need to be at a gut level that everything I've done with my life, whether I'm a clergyman, whether I'm a CEO, whether I'm a successful a family member, it means nothing. Everything I've done up until this point has not worked. And I had to take a look at my life based on my actions up until 1988 when God got me sober. How much has alcohol influenced the course of my life up until that point? Every area of my life. I didn't have one successful relationship. How could I have a successful relationship with anyone, with a guppy, for God's sake? If my master is alcohol, that means everything is second. So I may want to show up to the girlfriend, I may want to show up to my family, I may want to show up for a job, but this other thing calls for first, and I need to take care of that first. And nothing can get in the way. And if it gets in the way, I'm going over it, around it, or right through it. Because my master is alcohol. Which means if there's a master, we have a slave, and that's me. I'm a slave to what this stuff does. And alcoholism and addiction demands obedience from me. And where's all does this stuff reside? not in the drug dealer, not in the liquor store, not in the bartender. It resides in my own head. That's where my greatest enemy will be found. In my own thinking, which is broken, which is another realization I had to come to, that my way, my outlook on life, my thinking does not work in any area. I don't care if I'm an accountant balancing books for corporations. My way does not work. That took years of grinding me down to dust. All I had to do was look back on my experience and say, I lived most of my life so far in treatment. I've been arrested way too. If I get arrested again, they're going to send me away. Every relationship, infidelity was, what's the big deal? I stepped on people I stole from. It went on and on like most of us. And yet I would come into AA, or I should say come into treatment, and think they had it wrong. I would come into treatment and think they were being too rigid with me while I'm bleeding to death, figuratively speaking. So one of the areas of my life that I really take a look at was me and what was going on in here. I had a soul sickness. Now, the soul, the spirit, is never sick. That's pristine. That's perfect. But I was experiencing soul sickness because my mind was my God. It owned me. So it took years for me to really digest step one. One of the greatest freedoms I've had is coming to the realization of my own humanness and my own brokenness, that I'm flawed. I'm the engine that leaks oil. Those cars that leak oil, we all had one of those. Makes weird noises when you drive away. That's me. And there's a really good possibility it's going to be that way till God calls me home. If I was perfect, why would I need God? Why would I need you? Why would I need any of this? If I was perfect, I would never even need a drink. But I'm so far from that. I'm so far from that, so I need to go back to this power. In the realization of my own humanness and brokenness, once we get that and start to have a complete dependence upon our Creator, we get to do godly things in our life. And why we get to do godly things? Because my dependence, my guidance, my everything is about going to God for guidance, for direction on what to do and what to say. We get to do godly things that really don't make sense based on my track record. But that's how we do it. It's called entering the world of the Spirit, where left looks like right and right becomes left and up is down and down is up. It makes absolutely no sense to a thinking mind, the entire spiritual walk. So if you're new and trying to figure out what this is, you're wasting your time, because it's trying to figure out how God operates. What we can do is just chop wood and carry water. We will quickly find out, as my sponsors reminded me many times, that God carries his water in broken pots. That's us. That's something else that doesn't make sense to a logical mind. How is that possible? Why would God want to put his precious water into me that's broken? Because that's how he does it. God could have used great minds to fix and deal with people like us. There are great minds, very educated people who try to deal with people like us. Most of them work in treatment centers. And we keep relapsing. Then we come into Alcoholics Anonymous, or perhaps another 12-step fellowship, and we get someone who's armed with the facts, who presents the instruction to us, and we're desperate to take them. And somehow our whole life is revolutionized. Things that doctors and chemists and pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, ad infinitum cannot fix, but we can. Because what we do, we have a direct path from where we are in wreckage to God. Bill says, we found utopia in the sacred rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Utopia. That's a very interesting word. Nirvana. Heaven in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it doesn't say because we get rich in AA or we get the relationship in AA. We just chop wood and carry water in AA. And we find utopia, which makes absolutely no sense, because no matter how much stuff I put into my body, I never got utopia. I got nice. I thought I was better looking. I thought I was more muscular. I thought I was more of a worldly guy. But that ran out the next morning. I thought she was prettier too when I was drunk. I happened too. So step 1, 43 pages in a big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, slams home to a guy like me of what I suffer from. I can't tell you how many folks, I've been in the treatment center business almost as long as I'm sober, folks who have gone through double-digit treatment centers, and still don't know what they suffer from. It happened to me just today working. What do you suffer from? I have no idea. How many treatment centers? A handful. How did this happen? Who's holding the secret in the closet from you? Then we come into Alcoholics Anonymous, where we're looking for a solution, and we're looking for the truth, and we're presented with the solution, we're presented with the truth, and we don't like what we hear, so we leave. Me as an alcoholic, I stand before you as probably the biggest hypocrite in the room, and based on my past behavior. And only because of Alcoholics Anonymous and the loving God am I no longer a hypocrite. But left untreated, I will do one thing and say another, and vice versa. That's how I operate. That's my brokenness in full bloom. I am not a nice guy. And one of the things I had to get rid of, and most of us have to get rid of, that was somehow nice people. We're not nice people. Because we have him and her together, and they're running together. I love you, no, I love you more, no, I love you more. And there's one bag, wake up in the morning, well, I don't love her that much. Ego doesn't want to touch that. But the idea is about ego deflation, grinding the ego into dust. And once I understand what I suffer from, I start to see things a little bit clearer as to why I continue to use against my own will. I can't believe I'm going to go do this, but I have to do it. I'm demanded to go do this. I have to. And then once we start, we can't stop, and now there's no choice involved anymore. And then 1988 showed up, where I experienced a necessary ingredient, and that was my GOD, a gift of desperation, the GOD, that beat me into a state of reasonableness where I was willing to listen to something other than my own head, someone else other than me. And only desperation brought me to that place, that jumping off place. And I remember, never forget that day, I had the clarity of God gave me the clarity that one more drink, I die. If I don't get a drink, I die. I'm in serious trouble. And I reflected in a brief moment that I haven't been nice from the stuff I'm taking in a really long time. I'm drinking just to breathe at this point. And when you take that away, the world becomes hurt. It's like a pincushion coming at me. It hurts too much. And so I got to take a look at that. My powerless over alcohol, no choice and no control before I pick up a drink and after I pick up a drink in the body. That I get bookended, I'm in a vice grip and I can't get out. Step one tells a drunk like me, Pete Marinelli, you are drinking. I don't care how long you're sober. I don't care you do good things. I don't care you have the best intentions. We are going to drink, period. It's non-negotiable. That's step one. And I can't fight through that. I can't think the drink through. I can't play the tape to the end. I can't remember where I come from. I don't have that kind of endurance or that kind of insight because I have an alcoholic mind that'll say, well, it wasn't that bad. And we're only going to do one anyway. Just a taste, just a bump, just a little something. I mean, after all, I got 90 days now. I mean, I'm Moses. Plus, she loves me, so it makes it legal. Until we're spiritually fit, until I'm spiritually fit, and until I know what God's calling for me is or my purpose in life, this is going to ruffle feathers, but here it goes. I have no business getting into a relationship with anyone. Because if I'm not spiritually fit and I'm not clear on my purpose in life and God's calling for me, that means I'm still driven by other things other than God. Which means as soon as I get into a relationship, I immediately experience stalking, codependency. I'm either walking in front of her or behind her or vice versa, but I'm never walking shoulder to shoulder. Because I'm not spiritually fit. I'm not sure the direction I'm going. I don't know what my calling is. I'm kind of feeling my way around, and I have this human person next to me. This isn't a pet. This is a person with feelings. This is a person with outlook. This is a person with aspirations, and they may be just as disturbed as I am, and blind lead the blind, we're both going in the ditch. And the ego says, yeah, but we're different. I have 30 days, she has 15. We're going to make it. There's a lot to step one. I mean, it's talking about the drink. But how do I get step one to meet me at 28 years sober? How do I go through 43 pages in the big book with 28 years sober and say, well, I don't drink. I haven't had a drink or any mood or mind-altering substance going on 29 years. I mean, how's this thing meet me? By looking at any kind of current unmanageability, any area of my life where I'm attempting or have been playing God. What kind of fear is showing up? That I disguise fear by saying I just care and I'm really in fear. How do I distinguish between passion and being compassionate and just being fearful? Well, I love them, I have to protect them. No, you're just afraid. Because God's not going to work in that area. And that stuff has tentacles. And it begets more fear and it begets more fear. And suddenly I'm walking around with 28, 29, 30, 40 years and I'm wrapped up in fear. I'm in lockdown and I can't breathe. And the mind says, it'll fix this. And out of nowhere, I get hijacked. And if you stick around long enough, talking to a couple of folks earlier, we will hear these stories. How did Joe go out? He had 30 years sober. He was here every day. His body was here. But if we pried him open, we see a train wreck of untreated alcoholism. And the thing about Alcoholics Anonymous, one side of our triangle, one side of our glorious legacy, is the 12 steps from the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's how we get recovered from this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Do I want to do this walk? If I'm desperate, I'm going to say yeah, even though I don't know what the walk looks like. And that's the point that we're talking about in step 2, that I will get to a place of sanity. And if I'm being restored to sanity, it must mean I was insane at some point. And it wasn't me being on a drunk and doing stupid things. It's being sober, getting released from a treatment center and going right to the liquor store and on the way into the treatment center saying, I'm done. Or whatever it might be. I'm never going to cheat on them again. I'm never going to steal again. I'm never, and there I am doing it again. This is not the plan. How did I get in so deep? What I need to be was willing to be fundamentally different, deep down inside, that everything about me had to change. Everything. I was confronted when I was living in Minnesota in a halfway house by how I dressed. I started dressing different. I was coming up on 6 months, and I thought I was like Tony Soprano. Oh, that's still in group. I was in those. You watch you graduate and you're living at your own place and you go to the old treatment center, you look at the groups. I used to be in those groups. I've risen above all of you now. That's what I was getting. My shoulders got a little too wide, a little swagger going on. I was getting all Brooklyn on these folks. Not good. Not good. And I got confronted heavily by a gentleman named Bob Bannister. He's a Midwest guy. His hands were as big as this podium. And he called me into his office. They said he wants to see you. And I walked in the office and I sat down. He said, I didn't tell you to sit. I said, it's going to be this way now. And I stood in front of him, and he kept slamming the desk, and he just went up one side and down the other, and every F-bomb you can think of about what I was about to do to my life. And the first thing he addressed was how I was dressing now. Is you look like a gangster from New York. I thought that was a compliment. I didn't know. I'm good to go. And he proceeded to tear into me. When did this all start? There was more to how I was dressing. It was the untreated stuff. The stuff inside the cup I was talking about. I was cleaning the outside of the cup. I didn't go in yet. So what's ever going on in here is always going to manifest outward. And he confronted me on that. The way I confront men I sponsor or people who attend my groups in the business I'm in. And there's a handful of them here tonight. They will tell you. Did we forget to shave today? Why are we wearing gym shorts to an AA meeting? Are we in the gym or are we in a sacred place called AA? Would you show up to your brother's wedding in gym shorts? Then don't show up to my AA meeting unless you have no clothes to wear. And it goes on. This is how they taught me. Because everything had to change. Everything. Everything means everything, by the way. Not just some things. And what I tend to do is I love God, and I love God's will, but I like my will and me a little bit more. And God could take the drink from me, and God could take the narcotics from me, but leave the relationship and the sex and the money alone. I got it. That's not really unmanageable. It's because of the drink and the drug. And then we remove the drink and the drug, and we find we're still in the toilet because we still have the poison here. And step 2 is about restore me to sanity or wholeness of mind. Truth or God, those words are synonymous. In the big book Alcoholics Anonymous, in chapter 2, Agnostics, which we're introduced to on page 45, that lack of power was my dilemma. I had to find a power by which I could live, not drink. It talks about how difficulty arises when we talk about God to a new man. That the difficulty is never with God towards any of his children. It's always us towards God, based on our own perceptions and conceptions, illusions and delusions about God. God doesn't have a problem with us. It's we who have the problem with God. I had to come up with my own concept of God. It talks about the Wright brothers who flew for the first time. It talks about their childish faith was the mainspring of them even attempting that, the childlike way about them. Why can't we do this? Of course we could do this. We have faith we can do this. While the people on the sidelines are going, you're never going to do it. It's never happened. On paper, it doesn't work. They said, no, flying blind, I'm going to do it. No pun intended. And they did it. I need to approach God in the same sense of, why can't it happen? Why can't God create a miracle in my life? He created me in the first place. We've never sunk that low where God is going to disown us. No one's a stepchild to God. But the mind wants me to believe just that. Because it wants me dead, will settle for me drunk, and will go to any lengths to get me there. But God is going to any lengths to get me. And the only thing God wants is my soul, by the way. He's not interested in what I drive. He gave it to me in the first place. He's not interested in my job unless I'm doing his work, which he put me there in the first place. The money he gives me. I'm clear on that. I'm a steward of all of that stuff. I don't take ownership of anything. This arrival point of sanity, wholeness of mind, truth, God, those words are synonymous. I'm going to get there. Am I willing to do that walk? And now if I have reservations, a lurking notion, if I'm still in a place of uncertainty or wavering, being double-minded, Scripture talks about being the man who's double-minded. I'm never locked into, I'm going. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but they're doing it, I'm going in. Almost like a child when you tell them Santa Claus is coming tomorrow. And they, okay, great. And they're all, Santa Claus is coming. How many of us adults long for those days when we can believe Santa Claus is really good? The innocence of it. I know I do. And some punk said, you still believe in that stuff? You know? And I felt like an idiot. And the air came right out of the bag. But that's how I need to approach God. Why not? God's going to any lengths, pursuing every one of us, including me, to have a relationship with us. And we'll go to any lengths. And in that any lengths, God's going to take away the relationship that we're holding on to because it's in the way. God's going to remove the money that we're holding on to because it's in the way. And how much of that we need? Just enough not to need God. God's going to even toy with our health to get our attention. And so we look at these things that we interpret as painful as something really bad. Like God sending me the trials of Job. What all he's trying to do is clear out stuff to get me. Because we happen to be that important to him. We are all the prodigal son. We all are. And when we finally come home to whatever 12-step fellowship it is, or some of us go back to our religious communities, a feast is prepared for us. It's called welcome when you walk in the door, and people applaud for you. Would you like some of this to drink?
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. You have what I got. Same thing. Came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. How it looks now is that God has restored me to sanity. And I can bear witness to that. And not only with the drink or substances, but other areas of my life where I've quit running the show. In fact, any time nowadays that my sponsor gets all my inventory, as soon as I decide to drive, I have a lot more inventory to write. And a lot more pain I'm dealing with because I decided I can do this. And I can't. Of myself, I am nothing. The Father doeth the works. That's clear. Of myself, I am nothing. That's not out of the big book. That's old stuff. That's a spiritual law, which I need to be willing to live by. Less of me, the better. More of me, not good. So step 2 talks, in chapter 2, Agnostics, it tells me how to find God, where to find God, and even why to find God. When I see you solving your problems by going to God, I can't deny what my eyes see. I can't deny what my ears hear. You're talking about God, going to God, getting God in the 12 steps, and I'm desperate to get well, so I'm going to do what you did. How do we find God? Lay aside old ideas. And where? Right down in here. The journey is always in, never out. Because that's where the unmanageability always exists. The unmanageability is not out there, it's in here. And so I sat with my sponsor, sat with all my sponsors, and I took a look at where I was currently with bedevilments. What's my current unmanageability? What's my current conception of God look like right now? And what is the thing I'm holding on to? Because we all got one of these. We all come into we all come into recovery, whether it's AA or any other fellowship. We all come into recovery with that thing that we swallow hard on, that pain, that uncomfortability, that hate, whatever it might be. We all got one good 4-letter word that we want to give to somebody. We all got it. What are we going to do about that? Meetings aren't going to treat that. You can't talk about that at a meeting like this, at a speaker meeting, but we walk in with it and we go home with it. What are we going to do about that? Am I willing to take a journey that God's going to give me wholeness of mind? Yes. How does wholeness of mind happen? It just shows up? No, it's by the removal or the death of self before the physical death. I need to shed the skin of what has been walking around. That's me. Old man into this new man. Out of desperation, I take a look at step 3. It says, rarely have we seen a person follow our path. That's how it should read. Rarely have we seen a person fail. Fail at what? God consciousness, sobriety, spiritual awakening. Those people who follow this path, thoroughly follow this path. I have to ask myself, how thorough have I been so far? Am I even in the steps? I got 6 months, I haven't started the steps. Did you look over your shoulder? Because that's where alcoholism is sitting. You're going to get hijacked. And if I don't, I'm probably not alcoholic or addict. I'm just a hard user. But rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed this path. The path of a decision in 3 and steps 4 through 9, where something happens in 4 through 9. Where there's a shift in consciousness. Where we're starting to look at the world differently. We're starting to hear different. We're not listening to that old guy anymore. And little by slowly, the mind is shutting down. It's because I'm taking a look at my own current unmanageability. All the past hurts. All the past resentments. I'm willing to go in there, but I don't have the power to do it. So what my sponsor had me do was write down my old conception of God, the one I grew up with. My current conception of God, what that looks like right now. And what I would like it to look like in the future. A loving, forgiving, kind, gentle God. Okay, put that on paper. Because the big book says I can do anything I want when it comes to my own conception of God, no matter how inadequate was sufficient to make the approach. Am I willing to walk towards that goal, that ideal? Religions say you have to believe this way, and if you don't, you're going to hell. Whether that's true or not, that's not the place to discuss this. But I'm here for AA. I'm an AA member. And AA says your own conception of God, no matter how inadequate was sufficient to make the approach. Group of drunks, good early direction, you're on your way. Am I willing to do the walk? That's what the book's interested. Are you willing? And how willing are we? By my actions you will know. Not by what I say. If you want to know my truth, if you want to know what my belief systems are, do not listen to a word I say, but see what my actions tell you. The great thing that this book does, and almost every one of my elders, my heroes in AA, Started like I did. GOD, Group of Drunks, Good Early Direction, with some issues with their religious community. Go through the steps, go through the steps, go through the steps, and land back home in their religious community and become good churchmen. Couldn't see that, and God knew that. I can't feed you all of me right now. I'm going to spoon feed you and take you on a little journey here. And little by slowly shed the old skin and bring you home to me. God knows how to operate around us. He created us. Some guys dive right into church and they're lightened up. I wasn't one of those guys. And I say that because I know there's a lot in here. But it's all good. I'm willing to grow spiritually. I'm willing to do this walk. I'm willing to go to any lengths to get well. And when I ask God to help me, I need to be really clear that when I ask Him for help, the help He sends down might not be the help I was thinking He was sending. I think I shared last week, my sponsor would tell us when you're really hurting for money and you need money, give some of what you have left away. What? Because the universe will always respond in kind. A couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, I was up in New York, and I got a thing for homeless folks. So I kept passing money around. I'm grateful I have some money in my pocket to do things like that. I gave away a whole bunch of money for fun and for free. I wasn't looking for applause or Salvation Army to make me the new general or something. It's just what I did. And so I'm going to midnight mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral, and I find out as we're getting closer, you need tickets to get in, and there were no more tickets. I said, now what do I do? And in that moment, there was a woman with her friend in front of us. She says, Merry Christmas, I have 2 free tickets. And we got in VIP, right up to the altar. You think that was a coincidence? God says, you took care of my kids for the last 3 days. Now I'll take care of you. The timing was perfect. A minute before, a minute later, I wouldn't have gone into mass. The universe always responds. Made a decision to turn my will and life over to the care of God, my thinking and my actions over to God that I don't even know about yet. I'm listening to you at your God. My God is a group of drunks for good early direction. I believe in God. I'm agnostic. I believe in God. I just don't know how tangible it is. You can't really prove the existence of it. And what I tend to do is look at all the worldly clamors and say, well, how would God permit this? You're talking about a loving God and we're in a war. We're talking about a loving God and children are dying. And I would use that as wholesale condemnation against this one power. Because I'm trying to figure out how God operates and I can't. It's futile. And even if I did, how's that working out for me? Give me a drink. Now I need a drink. It's none of my business. My business is my life is in a mess, and I better lock into something. And I have a room full of folks who are saying they found a GOD of their own understanding, and they're maintaining sobriety. I got to get in. And it's just that way, because if I don't, I know I'm going to die. That kind of clarity. Our book says the first step is... we have to concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. Submission, to submit under pressure. When we get to that place of, it's over, that is an awakening. That is a God wink. We're done. Now follow me. So I get to step 3. And we have, on page 62, it talks about how selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. And roots on a tree are buried underground. You can't see them. So I will pretty up the outside, but the roots are rotten. And what has to happen to a guy like me, God has to put his hands around the trunk and rip the entire thing out. And strip the roots down and put it in new fertile soil. That feels incredibly uncomfortable. No one wants to have a shift like that. As sick as this is, I'm used to it. And moreover, I don't even believe I'm worthy. This was what my voice told me. To be joyous, happy, and free. How corny does that sound? I'm joyous, happy, and free. I love God. I'm a dope fiend. I go to treatment. I go to jail. I got tattoos. Get out of my way. If I always do what I always did, I'm always going to get what I always got. Period. Doesn't negotiate. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. when I'm in that place, it's all about me. So you know what I do? I try to take rather than give. And when I take, I hurt you. And what do? You push back. And I say, why are you doing this to me for? I can't believe they're doing this to me. How many of us have walked around, I was one of them, pointed fingers at everyone. If my mom didn't do this, if my dad didn't do this, if my ex-wife, my ex-husband, my kids, and it went on. The whole entire planet was at fault. But God forbid I would say, well, maybe I did something too. Then I get to a place where I say, well, I probably shouldn't have done that. But if you didn't do this, I would have never done that. And that's about as far as we go. What step 3 is setting me up for is to go into this cave where all my brokenness lies. All my hurts, all my fears, all my sex behavior that I want to hide in a closet somewhere so no one ever hears about it. All of it. That's all the stuff that's blocking me from God. And I got to uncover, discover, and discard. And the only one's going to do that for me is God. So I'm making a decision right now. I'm going in out of desperation. We have a beautiful prayer in step 3. It says, God, I offer myself to thee, to you, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Stop there. We just told God, you take me like the wretch I am, as I did, and you do whatever you want with me and my life. I have no input anymore. Because as soon as I have input, I screw it up. Any favor I've been given in my life, any good deeds I've done in my life, all credit goes to my Creator. Every screw-up I take full accountability for. Because that's how I operate. The screw-up, that's me. The lying, that's me. That is me. The other stuff is spirit. Helping the needy. And so on. I could put no gods before this God. I need to learn to begin to practice fidelity to God. Because we believe in God, but I also like money more. I like relationships more. I like the gym more. I like spending money more. I like big shotism more. And I like God too. It's God and nothing else. And then what happens when that vacuum appears, God starts to fill it up with things that He needs for us to do. People that we should supposed to be around. But I need to take my hands off the wheel. You build with me and do with me as thou wilt. It says, relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do thy will. What sort of current bondage do I have? I can tell you what I have is my own thinking mind. That creates drama. Creates controversy. Creates a traffic jam and I'm the only guy on the road. Right? Relationship is going good and my mind says, yeah, but you know what's going to happen. Money's good, yeah, but you know it's going to happen. And so here comes greed, here comes neediness. It goes on and on ad infinitum. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them can bear witness to those I would help of thy power, love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. We're telling God, let me be proof of the great things you can do with my life. At the end of the third step prayer, there is no amen. Build it and forget to put it in. We're not done. We're offering up our thinking and our actions, God, basically our whole life to this Creator that we don't even know so much yet. And we're about to begin some work. And God's taken us by the hand in this motion. It's one movement, 4, 5, 6, and 7. We're about to go into the cave with God's light, God's endurance, God's courage, God's strength, and start to look at the things that are blocking me from God, which means I'm about to get really uncomfortable. But if I don't shake it up, I will never wake it up. And God's going to reveal to us in step 4 the things that we've tried to forget about and bury. But they needed to be put light. They need to have the light put on them. If not, we begin to die again, which we'll talk about next week. That's all I got. Peace.